Welcome back to the channel. A video that has gone viral in the world, certainly in the UK, over the past several days, and I think it's just happened in the last few days actually, is one that shows 2017 World's Strongest Man, TV presenter, media personality, and MMA fighter Eddie Hall. Let's call it vividly remonstrating three drivers of cars on the road just outside his home. Now, this is a video that has gotten a lot of attention online, as these things seem to do. In it, he is telling the drivers of those three cars, and even running at the one of the drivers at one point, in no uncertain terms, to leave, to get out of there. Now, obviously, this video, as I said, obviously has gotten a lot of attention, and it's led to a lot of the comments, both in that video and on social media as well. A lot of the comments have obviously been anti-Eddie. A lot of them have questioned his behaviour, according to Eddie in the response video, which I'll talk about shortly. Call him all the names under the sun and probably then some, honestly. But that has kind of also been partly fueled by the comments of the guy. I'm not going to use his name, but the guy who was one of the drivers in the cars filming on his phone. Uh, he was the one that obviously uploaded the video to TikTok, or Facebook. I believe it may have been removed now. What again? That's maybe something that I think Eddie says in his response video. But the guy that was filming on his phone and was ran up by Eddie when they were basically kind of refusing to leave, and Eddie got quite angry and upset about this situation. He was making comments. Again, this is according to Eddie's Hall's response video on YouTube. Uh, the guy was commenting on that video because I believe the guy removed it from his Facebook page. But the guy was saying, making out the story was that he and his friends, with actually it turned out to be some young children in at least a couple of the cars, at least one of them I think, but certainly maybe one or more of the cars, it seems. And I would looking at the footage and looking at the stuff that I've seen of this situation, probably a couple of very young kids in two of the cars at least. But the guy who was filming made the comment and put the story, his narrative, his story of the situation, anyway, that basically he and his friends were just turning up at Eddie Hall's home, hoping to see him, them and their young kids, hoping to maybe just get a picture with Eddie. Now that obviously again led to some more comments and more questioning Eddie's behaviour. And I've seen the videos. I sat and watched. I've watched, been able to find a copy of the original video that was uploaded, showing Eddie telling the guys to go away. Again, I've seen Eddie's response video. Certainly, firstly, that video definitely just shows you obviously one side of the story, and that is uh, typical kind of nowadays. That honestly, and I'm not going to say that this is everybody, but certainly sometimes in some of these kind of videos that especially go viral, and even actually you see it sometimes in people's response if they're like, for instance, they're a Karen, or if they're a complainer, or they're doing something wrong, they'll pull out their phone and start recording also. Like that gives them some kind of moral high ground, instantaneously, just because they're filming, which is obviously not always the case. There are always two sides to the story, and the guy certainly makes out again that they were just there to trying to see if they could see Eddie, get a picture with him, especially maybe with the young kids. So it seems very young, very very young kids in the cars. I'm not sure what ages are or how many kids are, but certainly that's the kind of story, the narrative that's put forward by the guy that does the filming on the phone. So that again obviously went quite viral, got a lot of attention again, people making lots of comments. Eddie Hall himself ended up just last night making basically a response video to this on YouTube. If you want to find the whole 30-minute response video that he made and watch it in its entirety, which I do suggest anybody interested in this situation does. I'm sure. I think the original video for the gentleman is going to be removed on social media, but I've just quickly checked, and there's lots of copies of it, and lots of people obviously doing the supposed reacting or re-uploading it to various different social media platforms. But Eddie has his own channel, which is called Eddie Hall the Beast. The Beast being his nickname. He has uploaded just last night uh, a 30-minute response video actually laying out the situation with proof, including CCTV footage from his home that he used to show exactly and actually what happened in this situation. Now, I have to say, first of all, before we get into what he said in response, as I said, just the original video just shows one side of the situation, which is again not always necessarily the truth. And I have known many people in the past, they will claim to have evidence of this, evidence of that. They'll claim that their way is the truth and the honest story of what happens, which is why I think it's great, and I kind of hate the fact, I'll get to my own opinions later on, but I kind of hate the fact that somebody like Eddie, who, yes, he is a public figure, um, but I kind of hate the fact that sometimes it takes having to bring out all this evidence and bring out all this footage to basically kind of clear him and to show the truth about what actually happened. Eddie tells the story far better than I could on, again, his own YouTube channel, Eddie Hall the Beast. That's his YouTube channel. He goes through the whole story. And one of the things that kind of irks me um, in this is actually what time this happened. Because the guy also said about Eddie not having respect for his kids in the situation, which apparently Eddie, again in the response video, says he didn't even realise there were kids in the car until the guy started making comments, until the middle of the kind of confrontation argument that they had with the driver still in the car. He didn't realise that there was kids there until that point. But Eddie shows that this actual whole incident, which is one of the main bits that irk me, is the fact that this takes place at approximately the beginning of this whole incident, because it lasts approximately, I believe it was 18 to 20 minutes in total, probably for about the situation. It begins around about 8:30 p.m. Now, I'm really not I'm not a public figure in any way, shape, or form, and I'm instantly kind of have my back up, and I think it's a bit of a red flag. First of all, okay, yeah, he's a public figure, and I know some people will believe that that means any public figure owes them something like a picture or a meet and greet kind of situation if they see them out and about anywhere at all or at their home. And I honestly don't know, first of all, really whether Eddie's home is locally known. I'm not sure entirely where exactly he lives. I believe somewhere in England, but I don't know whether it's a bit of local knowledge where his home is. If people can walk, can go to wherever it is he lives. and go down particular streets, and they know, right, that's Eddie's home, or that's Margaret's home, or that's Bill's home, or that's whoever's home. I don't know whether Eddie's home is well known locally, as in we all know where Eddie lives. I honestly don't know. It's a possibility, very much so, that some public figures, people in local areas, it looks like a kind of fairly, look, just from the CCTV footage, it looks like maybe it could be a little bit rural place. I'm not too sure, but maybe it is a good possibility that some local people, maybe, I don't know whether he's grown up in the area, I don't know entirely his history, maybe it is a little bit known where his home actually is, by at least by local people or people who live in the area. Even if that is the case, I'm certainly getting a bit of a red flag for me of just turning up at his home. He said before on social media during this video, he said it quite near the end of that video, that he actually has said on social media several times that he doesn't wish people to go to their home and to his home anyway. So I can think arriving at his home at around about 8:30 p.m. is a little bit of a red flag. Is a little bit of a, honestly, that's a bit of a, for me at least, that would be a bit of a kind of a signal of, okay, it's this late at night, and especially we all know that Eddie's got kids, and he talks about them a little bit in the video as well. Obviously, he was trying to relax and, kind of spend a little bit of time with his kids before they went to bed and get some sleep. That's kind of a bit of a thing. You've got to seriously think, okay, first of all, I'm going to his house. Unless you know him personally, again, just if you think you know him because he's a public figure, that's a bit concerning. That's a bit surely, and especially at that time of night where you've got to really seriously think to yourself, okay, is this something I should actually be doing? Which I would absolutely say no. It's not really something, in my opinion, that you should be doing. Not only that, you kind of have to understand where Eddie is coming from, first of all. Uh, that these three cars, it's kind of sporty cars. I'm not into cars, but it's kind of three kind of sport hatchback kind of things. I'm not sure what they're called, but they're kind of three kind of sportish cars, kind of boy racer type cars that with tinted windows. And again, Eddie shows CCTV footage of much of what happens, which is great, and I'm glad that he did that in his video. But these three cars just pull up literally on the edge of his driveway, one on one side of the road and the other literally on the edge of his driveway, because he has kind of he has gates, big huge gates, thankfully, a big security gates, but right where literally in the car park, one of the car parks, right in the middle of the kind of where the driveway meets the road. So if he was to be driving out, he or his wife, I don't know whether she drives, but anybody driving out of that driveway, that's exactly the place where you would join the road. And they park there. And that has to be a bit of a red flag to me as well. Again, another one, because they have such tinted windows, three cars in convoy showing up at that time of night outside of a public figure's home. That is a bit of a concerning. I think that kind of set obviously his wife off. It seems his wife obviously was maybe watching the CTV. He was sitting out in the back garden apparently with at least one of his kids, and obviously that kind of that raises a bit of alarm, especially these days. Three cars, sporty cars like that with tinted windows, pulling up at that time of night. That's concerning. So I think it's fairly understandable the initial reaction. I think that certainly his wife had. Now, this is the part where, again, Eddie tells the story great lot better than I do, but I think that this is kind of where the three drivers and those involved in the cars certainly became the villains of the story, really. I mean, again, if you kind of genuine fans of him, if again, maybe make the mistake of turning up at his home, at that kind of getting to the point where his wife comes out with one of the dogs. Apparently, it's an attack dog, according to Eddie in his video. Well trained though. Obviously, she brought out the dog with her for safety. At this point, I think he was still in the back garden. She politely, apparently, we don't get the audio, but apparently, right of her conversation because the audio was only near the door. But she basically politely, apparently, asks them to leave. Say basically tells them, it's their private residence, it's their home, they've got kids and stuff like that. And they're not going to be, they don't do, he's not going to come out with for pictures or anything like that. So can you please leave? And there's even really rude response from one of the women in one of the cars. But basically, it's a public highway and that they're staying because they had stayed apparently. I think at that point for at least about 10 minutes, just sitting outside the house. Again, extremely concerning behaviour, in my opinion. And I know some people will say that maybe he should have called the police. Maybe in the future, I think maybe that's what he should do. But you don't know why people are pulling up. And you think you can guess them. Maybe they want to meet him or say something to him. But they just literally sit. And at one point, there's two of the cars literally sit side by side. Um, as they kind of move up a little bit, two of the cars are sitting side by side, and apparently, according to what Eddie says, they were honking their horns and beeping um, outside the house for several minutes, whether it's trying to attract his attention and get a response from him. Um, I don't know, but that was apparently what was going on. So again, his wife goes out, has gone out at that point, asks them to leave. And again, surely you'd think at that point, you really have to think that, okay, maybe, okay, maybe we want to come around and see him again, maybe they knew where he lived, maybe they're local, I don't know where the people are from, but you kind of got the, if you're asked politely, like, this is our home, we don't do pictures or anything, this is our private residence, obviously, there's a private home, this is, whatever she said to them, she asked them to leave. Again, any sensible person would really think, okay, well, like, sorry to disturb you, didn't think this through, or apologise, whatever. I know I would probably end up doing something like that, saying, okay, sorry, thank you very much, and leave it. They don't. Again, I think that's the point where they move up the road. Apparently, according to what Eddie shows, from the comments supposedly by the guy who filmed on the phone, one of the drivers, he said that they moved about two houses up. Even in the CCTV footage, Eddie says the houses on that road are quite large. I wouldn't even say it was as much as two houses, even if the fencing was right there where you can kind of see the edge of the CCTV on the left hand side of the picture. They don't even move up one house. I think they would at least, and it's difficult, I'm not going to go on Google Earth and try and find a whatever. I'm not going to do that stupid, but even a decent sized house like I'm currently sitting in recording this, you wouldn't even just be next door. You certainly wouldn't be two or three houses up. You'd be at least outside next door at the maximum. And again, they kind of sit there for another about 10 minutes and it's another at least about 7, 8 minutes, I believe, almost 10 minutes there as well. And again, this is kind of I think that's where the kind of point where Eddie kind of goes out and basically asks them to leave and has that kind of confrontation with them. And again, he didn't realise it immediately until right in the middle of the altercation that there were a couple of kids in the cars. At least two cars, I believe, had kids in them because apparently I think the guy that was filming certainly you could hear crying of a child on the phone, on the recording, but unsure what was going on. That wasn't the one, because Eddie at that point was confronting one of the other drivers that was parked a little bit behind them. So again, I can kind of understand people's immediate reaction to that video, and questioning Eddie's behaviour and everything like that. But quite honestly, I think it's just a case of Eddie wanting to be careful. I don't think really Eddie Hall did anything really wrong in this situation. He was there were the turning up the house. As I said, that's one of the main concern me, especially now. And I've seen just seen late last night, and the reports again just early this morning about the incident that happened at Jennifer Aniston's house. When you've got a public figure like Eddie, and it's his home. He's got his kids and his wife there. We've been going through a very, very tough time, and I'm, really sorry to hear about what's happened recently with him and his wife, and what happened with the miscarriage and everything like that. Eddie is obviously just being the protective husband and father. I believe in this situation. Again, you can, especially nowadays, with so many public figures being harassed, and some people thinking they're entitled, just to again like appear at their home, because he said he's had that several times. It wasn't even the first time that somebody had apparently turned up at their home that day, and I've had several over the times, which is why I said earlier. Um, he had said on social media before that people were not welcome at his home. That obviously that's his sanctuary. That it's your private residence. Even public figures, are uh, they are entitled to their privacy, especially in their homes. And so I cannot. There are some idiotic people obviously out there. It's just I don't think. Okay, if you want to meet him, and you maybe you know that he in the the local area where he lives, maybe you can see him out and about at some point. I know there are certain situations she talks about in the video about going to fairs and things like that. Which again, I'm not a public figure. None of my parents have ever been. I don't have, I've never had that experience. And I can imagine how kind of frustrating it would be for a young kid, and who would not really quite understand why their mother, or especially in this case their father, would be continually stopped for pictures and to shake people's hand when you're just wanting to spend some time with your father and go on some rides and spend some time at the fair, and spend some family time with your parents, because he is away and he's working a lot, various different things that he does. I definitely think that those in the cars were definitely in the wrong here. Again, turning up at his home, you know, again, I mean, they didn't even really go. It wasn't really a case of. Again, that's the thing that kind of, I think, caused a bit of quite of the reaction that it did, was that they didn't just kind of pull up hoping to see him and thinking, we would sit for a minute or two trying to get up the courage, and then maybe going knocking on the gates, or I don't know whether they've got a buzzer thing, and and press the buzzer and say, well, excuse me, I'm big fans, is there any chance he could come out for a picture or anything like that? They literally just sit there for about 10 minutes initially. They just literally, three, again, and so you can kind of obviously understand the concern and maybe immediate alarm that I think his wife Alexandra, I believe her name is, actually had initially, because you've got three sporty cars with tinted windows just suddenly pulling up. You never know what they're going to do. You never know who. You can't. It's, as I said, why one of the reasons why he didn't realise there were kids in the car, because of the tinted windows. Couldn't really see anybody but the drivers really in the cars, and so you don't know what they're planning to do. Whether they're planning to try and attempt to rob the place, whether they're going to endanger the family's life. You genuinely do not know what their intentions are. Sitting there in tinted window cars, especially those kind of sporty kind of boy racer type cars, you genuinely do not know what their intentions are going to be. Especially again if they sit there. Now the guy that was filming also said that Eddie partly punched him in his jaw, and I think Eddie swung at the car. I honestly, especially ask Mariusz Pudzianowski. I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but that was the gentleman, another former strongest man that Eddie fought very recently. I think it was just last week. If Eddie punched somebody in the jaw, they would absolutely know about it, and they would absolutely be suffering. Even a kind of a not full strength blow, that would hurt. The guy would definitely need treatment, in my opinion. So the guy, obviously filming, was kind of trying to make up the narrative that they were just there and they were just hanging about, just wanting to meet him and stuff. So I think they definitely did it the wrong way. I think they absolutely, whether their intentions were honourable, let's say, initially, they definitely went about it the wrong way. Uh, and again, just turning up at people's home and stuff like that, it's just completely the wrong way to go about it. It is definitely, you know, again, especially if you've got young kids, both in both situations. I feel really, really sorry for the kids in on both sides of this. The ones in the cars, because they're probably so young that they don't understand. Because it sounds like a baby crying on the original video. It sounds like a very young baby or toddler crying, not understanding what's going on. And I don't know how old Eddie's kids are, but they're again I don't know how much aware that they were of the car, but hearing sudden revving and beeping and horns outside their home at that time of night, as I said, when they're probably they're starting to put them to bed, it's a bit concerning. You wonder what's going on. And so definitely those in the cars absolutely did it completely the wrong way. And again, especially as I said, that now we've seen the report with Jennifer Aniston, and I believe I don't know why that rung a bell. I think that something like that maybe happened to her before, but there's definitely been occasions where kind of Hollywood stars and other well-known celebrities have been had like robbers attempt or access their homes and you know, hold the family. So you kind of understand Eddie, who's a big guy, former power lifter, again, MMA fighter, world's strongest man in 2017. You kind of understand him just acting the way he did to try and protect his home and especially his family. Um, I definitely think that he did really nothing wrong in this situation. He does apologise in the video for any upset that he caused the kids. Again, that ones that he didn't realise initially were in the car, and to anybody's kids and stuff that he's accidentally, not intentionally, upset over the years. But yeah, I definitely think there's so much, especially actually even within professional wrestling circles, harassment of people is something, and even public harassment of public figures and celebrities. That is certainly something that has been a topic of conversation, especially in pro wrestling lately. We've seen a lot of the talk over, even in the last couple of years, actually talk about like different wrestlers catching flights and being harassed by basically merchandise sellers at airports. They're wanting they just turn up whether they are the wrestler, male, female, whoever, it doesn't matter. But the wrestler or wrestling personality is either catching a flight to somewhere or they're flying in for a show, whether it be a televised show, a house show, a non-televised event, or whether it's a big premium live event formerly known as a pay-per-view. and there's merchandise sellers there who have a lot of different maybe action figures and various different pieces of merchandise of a particular wrestler or maybe several wrestlers, and they try and push those wrestlers to sign absolutely everything. And if that wrestler was to do that, then that merchandise seller, which is why I'm making the distinction between them and just a regular fan who maybe happened to run into them at the airport or hang about trying to see their idol, they will go back, take that and sell it on websites like eBay. So they'll kind of put especially the women recently, that's been a major problem where some of these kind of merchandise sellers they'll bring a load of stuff and they try and pressure some of the superstars to sign absolutely everything without charge for no fee. They're not going to pay. Oh, we'll pay you five, $10, $15 to sign all this stuff. They just try and pressure them to just sign it anyway for no money, and then those merchandise sellers will go away and sell on again platforms like eBay and try and make a lot of money off of this stuff. And that has certainly been quite harassment talk lately, and I definitely hate that kind of thing as well. And I'm glad that some of the even the WWE guys, people, some of them are starting to refuse to sign these kind of things at airports. And if you want a picture with them, if they've got time and they're able to, then some of them will be happy to pose for a picture. Even at airports, if they've had a long day or they've been busy, which again Eddie says that himself. If you catch him out and about, if he's able to, if he's not spending time with family, like said, he said, going to fairs and things like that, he's not been able to do really with his kids because he would get stopped every 2 minutes for pictures and autographs and whatever. And again, if you've got young kids, it'd be frustrating even if you understand what's going on. But if you've got especially really young kids, then it's difficult because you just want to spend time with your dad, your family, have some family time. I know Eddie, says that he just wants to spend time with his family, spend time with his wife, his kids, and enjoy themselves. But get stopped every 2 minutes for somebody else, a picture, an autograph, or whatever it is. So I definitely think that Eddie in this situation, okay, maybe he could have acted a little bit more politely, but to be honest, especially with the response from one of the women, at least in the car, to his wife, who made a quite rather rude snapback remark about, oh, this is public highway, so we're just staying there. Uh, I kind of understand Eddie, especially in the situation, especially in modern times again, with who knows what intention these people's had. I think Eddie was absolutely right to act in the manner that he did. Maybe, okay, again, maybe if he realised there were kids in the car, maybe he would have been a little bit more calmer, a little bit more collected. But, and he obviously apologised for that in the video, but definitely, again, I don't agree with, even if um, where, as I said earlier, even if okay, this is where Eddie lives, if you're local or you live in the local area, and you know roughly like where so and so lives or where this person lives, and maybe they're a public figure, whether they're a strong man, television presenter, or whatever, definitely just turning up at their door is absolutely the wrong thing to do. Again, unless you're invited for whatever reason, maybe if you live in the local area, maybe you've got mutual friends, maybe, and maybe they're, I don't know, having some kind of event or barbecue and you're invited or you're brought along by a friend if it's okay, but definitely just turning up at their home, at their private residence, just on the off chance to see them, that is, that's like, the wife calls out in response to the snapback of the woman. Uh, the wife, again, I think his name is Alexandra. She says, you're just sitting there. You're just all sitting there like a bunch of weirdos. I believe something like that. She definitely calls them weirdo. And that is what they're doing. They're just sitting there again. Sensible person. If you do something like that, you make a mistake, or you kind of hang about somewhere that they are, and you want to kind of try and see the person, um, but maybe whether it's the wife or whoever or the person themselves, that maybe they're busy, maybe they can't do it right now, or you're asked, especially again in this kind of situation, you're asked to leave, then that's really the sensible thing to do. Apologise, or if apologise, say and just take your leave and go. That's what you really should do in that kind of situation. But as I said, that's what one thing that I think kind of alarmed Eddie and certainly didn't help the situation. That instead of just leaving when they were asked to leave, they ended up just literally moving up the road a tiny bit, sitting there and basically blocking the road as well. As I said earlier, there was two of the cars sitting side by side, which made it difficult for a couple of cars, as you see on the CCTV footage, to get past. Not just cars going past up and down the road, going wherever they're going. So yeah, this situation is definitely a bit of a concerning one, and definitely, absolutely, just turning up at public figures' home, even if you know where they live. Again, I mean, the local celebrity. I know there were some people where when Lorraine Kelly lived in the Dundee area, I'm sure there were a few people who kind of roughly knew where she lived. I don't think she was disturbed. And there's the Gladiator lady as well, Saber. I don't know where she lives. I think it's still in the local area. I think she moved recently. But those kind of people, even if they're a public figure, you know, unless you're invited or you maybe going up, I don't know, maybe going to especially if he's got kind of security gates or something. Uh, you know, if it's a situation where basically you know where they live, leave them alone, let them go. I'm sure, as Eddie says, and again, I found that true with a lot of wrestlers. Over the years, just not myself really, but on social media, you see a lot of pictures of wrestlers and other, even just other media personalities, celebrities, public figures. If they're just generally out and about, yes, you will get some who don't tend to do it, but generally a lot of them will be very amenable to, again, maybe signing an autograph, taking a picture with you, um, you know, shaking your hand, even if it's just that. A lot of these kind of things, but certainly turning up at somebody's home is weirdo behaviour. It is concerning behaviour, and in my own personal opinion, it is far from the right behaviour to do. And I know this may sound a lot like I am defending Eddie, which he doesn't really need defending. I'm just giving my opinion on what I've seen in the situation, which I know is quite long winded. But I definitely think that, especially when there are kids involved on both sides, just turning up at somebody's home is definitely a sign of weird behaviour. And again, I hope that, like Eddie says himself, he don't, and that's why I'm kind of not going through the guy's name or anything like that. It's very easily findable. Eddie gives the guy's first name on his video, and I'm sure people, even though I do not encourage it in any way, shape, or form, I'm sure there are people probably will look up and be able to find out the details. But and I say do not, again, like Eddie says, do not. I say do not. Uh, um, Send abuse or harassment or anything that guy or anybody involved's way. Uh, I definitely think that, and I hope really that those involved in the situation, those that approached Eddie's house, will have a good look at themselves, realise that they made a mistake. Again, I'm sure maybe they're big fans, as I said earlier. Maybe they do want to meet him, but there are lots of public events and perhaps chances that he'll be out and about, different events that he does. I'm sure there are a lot of different chances that are available publicly at these events where you can meet him. I certainly don't think that turning up at his home, especially at that time of night, is, especially when he's got kids and his family there, that is definitely not the right behaviour to have. So I do hope that they look at themselves and realise eventually that, okay, maybe that was the wrong thing to do. We should have maybe waited to see if we could see him. Like they talk about, the guy talks about, we thought maybe we'd see him a couple of times at the local pub. We never saw him there. Maybe in those kind of circumstances, it's best to wait until you do see him at that local pub or in the local area before you ask for a photograph and meeting and shake his hand or whatever. It's better to wait until you have one of those situations rather than rocking up to his house at 8:30 at night on the off chance you might see him, because the chances are, especially now, especially in modern times, and especially with the history of many celebrities and public figures, uh, these kind of situations, although they may have behaved badly, there may be people with genuine intentions, and as a lot of this kind of situations say, this only will harm any opportunities for those genuine fans in the future, because people like Eddie will be more wary and more hesitant about maybe even allowing those kind of opportunities to genuine fans in the future because of behaviour of people like this.